Hi there. Today I want to talk about a short story I think everyone should read for its timeless wisdom. Counterparts by James Joyce. Though written in 1914 and set in Dublin, Counterparts is a story that feels timeless. A portrait of the pain and dreariness of everyday life, the nature of violence and domestic abuse, and the quiet despair of human powerlessness, especially for the unseen and unheard. At its core, Counterparts is about power and powerlessness, economic, social, and psychological. The main character, Farrington, is a clerk who seems to live paycheck to paycheck. He seems to have no control over his circumstances, no hope of economic or social mobility, no real agency in his life. His life is dictated by systems he seems neither able to influence nor escape. And when people feel powerless, anger becomes their only form of control, which is the origin of the violence and brutality in this story. I will take this time to issue a content warning that the short story, which I'll be summarizing and analyzing today, contains scenes of violent child abuse. Unlike many short stories, which are over 50 pages long, this one is actually a short story, and its pithiness is its tragic beauty. I first read it in 10th grade, and I recently revisited it as a part of James Joyce's short story collection, The Dubliners. What makes Dubliners remarkable is how Joyce captures the smallness of ordinary lives while also seamlessly illustrating and integrating the larger social, political, historical, and economic context for these people's lives. He can give us access to a single character's point of view, in this case Farrington's, while also letting us see that that character's worldview isn't the whole picture. We see the grayness of the world through Farrington's eyes, but we also understand the world is grey for him, and others like him. Not always for everyone all the time. Farrington's job is to make copies, a tedious, mechanical task that seems to create no space for individuality or individual power. It's emblematic of Farrington's larger place within society and the world, and it's probably why Farrington is referred to as the man throughout this short story by the narrator. The first time we learn Farrington's name is because his boss refers to him that way, which is once again emblematic of Farrington's social position and function. It reminded me of Herman Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener, another short story about clerical work which I read in 11th grade, and haven't read since, but will probably read after this. Farrington's at work and his mind is constantly drifting. Remember being a kid and you just can't bring yourself to focus on a specific homework assignment that you're working on. You find yourself looking out the window, thinking of anything except the list of problems in front of you. It's an almost unhelpable, visceral, biological, automatic response within you that you aren't even aware of. That's what Farrington is experiencing, except in this case, the work is his whole livelihood. It's also hard because he's clearly not respected or appreciated at work, and respect and appreciation are important motivators for people at work. Recognition is a kind of psychological reward that motivates you to get things done. But Farrington's boss, Mr. Allen, has a vendetta against Farrington because he once heard Farrington mocking his Northern Irish accent. So when Mr. Allen finds out that Farrington is lagging behind on work, Allen badly scolds Farrington. This is the first place where power, powerlessness, and socioeconomics come in. Mr. Allen's verbal attack of Farrington is a small act of office tyranny, but it hits Farrington hard. Farrington's loss of dignity at work is just one piece of his bigger story, which is his lack of power in life. Farrington is also powerless over himself, over his emotions, over his low attention span, over his incapacity to fulfill his social and economic function as a clerk. So he sneaks off to get a drink in the middle of the workday. I'm not sure what the culture was like at the time in Ireland, but it was immediately unusual to me. It's certainly not common practice in my experience to get an alcoholic drink in the middle of a workday, but it is the idea of getting some kind of treat, coffee, pastry in the middle of a workday while working on a big project is something relatable to me, so I did kind of get that. When Farrington returns, the chief clerk asks him to take his materials to Mr. Allen at once. This was also relatable for me, especially in early years of school. I would be in the middle of a test and my mind would wander and then all of a sudden time would be up. I eventually got better as I got to high school, but even now, at work sometimes, I might take a small break in the middle of a laborious assignment and then all of a sudden realize, oh, I'm actually out of time. Farrington hopes his boss won't notice, but his boss does notice and he starts going on a rampage about Farrington's laziness. And I personally felt kind of bad for Farrington here because it feels like all of this is kind of beyond his control. I feel like deep down there's some kind of shame Farrington feels about not being able to complete his assignment, which is what drove him to get a drink in the middle of the workday in the first place. At some point in Mr. Allen's diatribe, Farrington makes a sort of witty reply, which amuses the attractive Miss Delacour in their office and infuriates Mr. Allen. Farrington is made to apologize and dreads what the next few days are going to look like as a result of his undutifulness and his cheek. Just as Farrington is powerless against his own emotional boredom and inattentiveness, This witty reply that Farrington made is also something that kind of just jumped out of him. It wasn't a conscious act of rebellion, or if it was a very poor one because Mr. Allen put him right back in his place. Farrington is now without a paycheck, having not completed his work, but is desperate to get drunk after a miserable workday. I think, again, it's relatable to want to get a drink after a really miserable day at work, but it almost seems as if this is Farrington's every day at work. What would a non-miserable workday look like for Farrington? Do we have any sense that he's ever completed his work satisfactorily? That he's ever received recognition or appreciation? Is he drinking because he had a bad day, or is he drinking because he has a bad life? So he pawns his watch just to buy drinks. At the pub, he brags about his clever retort to Mr. Allen, sprinkling some sugar, spice, and everything nice into his story. His friends laugh, but we, as the reader, can feel the hollowness underneath. We know, actually, that it was Allen who put Farrington in his place, that it was Allen who exerted his superior socioeconomic power over Farrington. Allen controls Farrington's paycheck. He can withhold Farrington's paycheck. He controls Farrington's whole livelihood. Farrington has no power to rebel against his boss, even with a small, cheeky remark, without immediately getting relegated back to his original status. So he has to seek refuge in fiction and alcohol. At this point, again, I feel a bit sad for Farrington because his friends are just here to have a good time, but he isn't really. He is here to avoid the reality of his life. Unlike his friends, he had to pawn his watch to even be able to afford his night out. Deep down, that can't feel good. And his sugaring and spicing of the story at work is one example of him avoiding the reality of his life. It can't feel good to brag about something and be applauded for something that isn't even real. And it just gets worse. Farrington tries to flirt with a woman who doesn't really engage with him. He buys drinks for a new acquaintance named Weathers, who doesn't return the favor. He loses an arm wrestling match twice, and with each loss, his powerlessness compounds. You know when people say, I needed a win today? Well, Farrington got no wins today. After a sucky day at work or with friends, the one thing we can all look forward to is crashing at home. But when Farrington comes home, his wife is gone, and there's no dinner waiting. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is also the first place that we learn about Farrington's family. We learn that Farrington's alcoholism and poor work ethic mean that he isn't respected in the household either. We're also told that he's, quote, bullied by his wife when he's sober, and that he, quote, bullies her when he's drunk. We also learn that they have 5 children, and one of his sons comes running down the stairs to tell him that their mother is at church. Farrington asks his son, what's for dinner? Which is kind of unusual when you think about it. Usually that's something a child would ask their parent, not the other way around. And his son responds, I'm going to cook it, Pa. The ... implies that the son might not have been expecting to be cooking the dinner, but now realizes that this is the role he has to fulfill, the role of consoling his father for his own survival. He's described as a little boy. He's clearly the smaller and less powerful figure here. The mom is at church. There's no one at home to handle the father at the moment. No one else to console him or be his punching bag. Farrington jumps up furiously and points at the fire. He sees the fire's been let out and dinner can't be made. It says, the little boy looked about him wildly, but seeing no way of escape, fell upon his knees. Now you'll let the fire out next time, said the man, striking at him vigorously with a stick. Take that, you little whelp. And the boy replies, oh, Pa, don't beat me, Pa. I'll say a Hail Mary for you, Pa. Oh my gosh, the ending shocked me when I first read it. It says so much about violence and its cycles. From my own experience, but without the violence, I remember how, as a child, if I got into an argument with my parents, I would sometimes get frustrated with my younger brother because that was easier. Joyce captures that same displacement of pain, but on a grander scale, the way that public social humiliation turns into private domestic cruelty. The final scene with a little boy is the culmination of the whole story. Farrington's encounter with failure, society-based, economy-based, and gender-based failures, both at work and in these small contests of masculinity like flirting or arm wrestling, all build up towards this moment. His wife, who might have offered him some sense of authority, is now absent. What's left is the rawness of Farrington's powerlessness, which manifests in his violence towards his even more powerless son. We spoke about social and economic power, but I also think gender-based power plays a critical role here. The boy's plea at the end, I'll say a Hail Mary for you, is painful to hear, but it also makes us think. Women are pretty sidelined in this story. There's Miss Delacour, about whom we know little other than that she's attractive and stylish. There's the attractive girl he flirts with at the pub, and then there's his wife, who's totally absent from the home. This story is about men and male functions. In fact, Farrington is mostly described as the man throughout the story. Mary symbolizes everything missing from the world of this story. Counterparts is a story about alcoholism, rage, humiliation, and masculine power. Mary stands for chastity, mercy, and maternal power. The text takes place almost entirely outside of the home, outside the space of maternity and the male-dominated space of work and the pubs. Even in this scene at the end, the boy's mother is absent, leaving the home feeling anything but homey. It's lacking in any kind of maternal or nurturing spirit from either one of the boy's parents. When the boy says, "I'll say a Hail Mary for you," it's as if he's calling on his absent mother to come protect him. If you know the Hail Mary prayer, the last words are, "Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death." So it could be the boy asking for forgiveness for his father's sinfulness, but the boy himself is in some sense literally at the hour of his death, facing what might feel like to him as potentially fatal violence. The boy is praying for survival for himself and his father. The wife's absence at the chapel mirrors Farrington's escape to the pub. With a physically absent mother and a spiritually absent father, with no dinner on the table and no money brought home, the boy is left to hold a fragile home together. He has to restore the peace. He has to cook dinner. He becomes the one who must pray for everyone. He's the one who, quote, "seeing no way of escape, fell upon his knees in prayer." What I appreciate most about this story is its ability to give us a window into a very specific kind, yet a very real kind of household that might be unfamiliar to many of us readers and thus quite shocking to us. But even though Farrington's violence shocks us, his loneliness and feelings of defeatedness are hauntingly familiar. Even if we haven't lived Farrington's life, we've all felt trapped in jobs, routines, in gender roles, in systems that feel indifferent to us and our individuality. We've all felt powerless and unseen. It reminds us of how easily our own pain, when unacknowledged, can turn outward. It reminds us that, in the words of James Baldwin, you too could be that monster. And that's what makes this short story timeless. It's not just about one man in Dublin in the 19-teens. It's about the world we still live in, where human respect is distributed unequally, and where oppression begets further oppression.